In 1989, the BBC aired one of the most disturbing documentaries ever made about the American death penalty. It followed the final 14 days in the life of a man awaiting execution. Standing beside him was a young British lawyer named Clive Stafford Smith.
There was a ring on the telephone. Edward must have thought that was someone calling for a reprieve, but it wasn't. It was the signal to kill him.
I am a freelance journalist who covers crime for a variety of titles, and I've been researching the death penalty specifically for more than a year now. When I spoke to Clive, I was expecting to hear legal arguments, but what I got instead were memories that felt painfully immediate. Now, sometimes as a reporter, you are talking to people about things that happened decades ago, so the time can somewhat soften the details. But on this occasion, it didn't. Clive has represented more than 400 people on death row, but the case of Edward will always stay with him for one reason. He watched the slow, agonizing death of an innocent man. Here's Clive talking about the moment he walked into the guest chamber with Edward and heard his harrowing final words.
And he let me go into the gas chamber with Edward, and I gave him a hug, and he whispered in my ear, "Is there something you know that I don't know?" And I wasn't sure what he meant. And so I said something stupid like, "No, Edward, you know more than I do about everything," or whatever. But I obviously worked out a few seconds later that he meant we really thought that they were going to call cut. And they strapped him into, if you've seen that film, you'll remember the rabbit scene where they gas a black bunny rabbit to prepare themselves to gas a black human being.
What Clive is talking about is this sickening scene here where staff at the prison use a black rabbit to check that the execution chamber is working correctly and to make sure the cyanide that they're using for the execution is going to work on Edward. What's particularly difficult about this scene is the way that you will see prison staff laughing and joking around just days away from Edward being executed. There's also this particularly grim scene where you will see a prison guard being used as practice inside the execution chamber. He's being tightly strapped to the chair because this, unfortunately, is how they plan to kill Edward. Edward spent around about 15 minutes in that chair thrashing around before he eventually died, and this prison guard was merely used as practice to ensure that it wouldn't go on any longer than it needed to. But the most disturbing part of the documentary comes towards the end, when Clive goes to Edward's funeral and meets a woman who makes a revelation that Clive will never forget.
I went to his funeral the next week in Walnut Road, Mississippi. And this woman, Mary, came up to me and said, I know he didn't do it because I was with him at the time of the crime. And I said, well, why didn't you tell someone? She said, I did. I went to the police and told them, and they told me to buzz off and mind my own business.